Okay, we're looking at the unit organizer for Unit 1, and what we see is that we are solving equations and inequalities. As you remember, an equation is a mathematical expression that has an equal sign. One side is equal to the other. And an inequality has a greater than or less than, or greater than or equal to or less than or equal to symbol. So x is greater than 3, for example, or y is less than or equal to 42. So that's what we're going to be looking at in this particular unit. Notice that all the unit organizers, as you will see as we go through this course, will always have this bubble here, and they all say the same thing. The unit is about using mathematics with and with technology. And then it says, I can, meaning you can, and here we go, solve linear equations with variables on both sides. Okay, so if I say 3x plus 2 is equal to 5x plus 6, then that has a variable on both sides, and you'll be able to solve those. The next bubble down talks about the distributive property. I can apply the distributive property when simplifying linear equations. The distributive property, other than the properties of equality, the distributive property is probably the most important property you will come across in algebra. So you'll use it all the time. You'll use it in Algebra 2. You'll use it in higher math. You'll use it through all your mathematics career if it goes that far. Okay, so we're looking at the next bubble here, and we're talking how to solve linear inequalities with variables on both sides. So like the linear equations with variables on both sides, this is the inequalities. So you can say 5x plus 3 is less than 2x minus 1. And then how do you solve for x? That's basically what it's saying, can you do? Okay, next bubble over is, can I apply the distributive property to linear inequalities? You'll find that dealing with equations and dealing with inequalities is almost identical. There are a couple things you have to watch out for that can bite you if you're not careful. But in essence, that's what we're going to do here, is use the distributive property with linear inequalities. Notice that these two bubbles here are linear equations, or solving linear equations with variables on both sides and using the distributive property. And then these two bubbles over here are solving linear inequalities with variables on both sides and using the distributive property. So basically it's the same process, except one deals with equations and one deals with the inequalities. And last but not least, we have solving for the variable of interest given a formula. So if I give you a formula, y equals mx plus b, and I say solve for x, what do you have to do with the other variables to get x by itself? If I give you Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared, what do you have to do to solve for m? Or any other formula or equation in math or science that I give you, you should be able to solve for the variable of interest. In other words, take the variable you're looking for and get rid of everything else on that side of the equation, whether you're adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing. So it's really a test of, can you use the properties of equality. Okay, so that's basically what we'll be doing in this particular unit. Now if you look down the left side, the day number, you'll see Day 1 vocabulary, which is down here. Vocabulary, which we'll go over when we do that. But basically, 2, 4, 6, there's 10 terms here that you may or may not have heard before. Equations you've heard of, inequalities, variable. You may have heard of some of these, but some you may not have. And we'll go over all of those because you will use these terms throughout the entire algebra course. And if you understand what they are, then when I say them, you're not confused as to what it means. Okay, so if you go down, look at the days, I've got 15 days designated for Unit 1, 15 school days, which means we go through all these lessons, vocabulary, properties, orders of operations, etc., all the way down to the Unit 1 test and review. We may go a little bit quicker, we may go a little bit slower. It doesn't matter. You know, the whole idea is, can we get all this stuff done in a reasonable amount of time so that everyone understands it. Okay, and then down at the very bottom you'll see, hey, I've got these questions here, and if we do the lesson right, notice what the questions say. Can I solve linear equations and inequalities with variables on both sides? Yeah, and there's that one there and that one there. Can I apply the distributive property and simplify expressions? Okay, there's that one there and that one there for the distributive property. Can I solve for a variable of interest? And there's that one there. Okay, so basically at the end of the unit, if you can answer those 3 questions on the bottom positively, in other words, yes, I can do those, then we've been very successful with this unit. And we can move on. And you can see the next unit up here at top right, still dealing with linear stuff, but it's the rate of change, which you've heard this term before, the slope. So once we finish these basic linear problems, we'll be moving on to slope. But in the meantime, it's going to take us a little bit to go through all these topics here to make sure you understand everything before we move on. And that's the Unit 1 unit organizer.